Hello students, welcome to this 24th lecture session of Database Management Systems. In this lecture, we discuss more on XML, which stands for Extended Markup Language. And in this session, we will see what is XML, what are the basics, and how a sample XML document looks like, what are the features of XML documents, what is DTD, and then what is XML schema. All of us know that nowadays XML has become de facto standard for exchange of data on the web. That means almost all platforms they support XML, parsing of XML documents. Hence, whatever data the businesses or organizations or applications wanted to exchange on the web, they exchange this kind of information or data using XML format. That's why W3C, World Wide Web Consortium, is the standards organization which is working on the standardization of XML related technologies. Of course, web technologies. And both HTML and XML have been derived from the common language, that is SGML, Standard Generalized Markup Language, which is a meta language, that is which is used to create other markup languages. Hence, it is clear that nowadays the data exchange on the web, mostly it happens using XML technology. And let us see how this XML is different from HTML. And in a broader sense, both of these look alike because both the documents, they have some tags and some content. But there exists a large difference between XML and then HTML. All of us know what is HTML. Basically, whatever content you have in the document. So if you wanted to specify the format or presentation details, then you can use HTML tags. That is to say what is body of the document, what is the font should be, and then what is the presentation, whether it should be in a table form or not, color, all these things can be specified using HTML tags. That is, HTML basically focuses on how the content of the document should be presented at the client window or browser. And if you look at the XML, it is meant for some different purpose. Actually, here we don't specify or we don't put focus on how the content should be displayed. Rather, we try to describe the content. That is, the tags in XML document are going to specify what is the content about. And if you just look at the XML HTML document, if it is like font is some 23 something like this, and then whatever content you put here, it will be displayed in this font, nothing else, or color, something like that. That's why it is going to specify the display particulars. And what exactly is this piece of information? The document never talks about that. But to parse it or to understand it, you should clearly understand what exactly the meaning of the content, the semantics of the content. Suppose if it is like Lucy, there is content like Lucy, whether it is a dog's name, whether it is a person's name, you don't know about that. So hence HTML will never talk about what is the content. So description of the content or meaning of the content is not given in HTML documents. So if you wanted to impart that knowledge, we will go with XML documents. So now let us see what are the differences between HTML and then XML. In HTML you cannot define your own tags. Whatever predefined tags are there, you will just use those tags and then go ahead with your document building. And where in XML, you can create your own tags depending on the requirement. So if you want to describe the content of the document, you can keep on creating new tags. That is possible. And the nesting of the tags in HTML document, it is already predefined. You cannot change that. Wherein in XML, the structure can be nested to any arbitrary depths. That is, one element can contain another element, that can contain another element, like that. The depth of this nesting can go to any arbitrary level. That is the difference between HTML and then XML. And another main difference is the XML may contain optional grammar in the form of DTD or schema. That means What should be the structure of the document, XML document? What elements are valid? What attributes associated with the elements are valid? What element can contain other elements? And what is the type of the element? All these things can be specified. That is, otherwise I can say that it is nothing but the structure of the document. It can be very well defined in XML using either DTD, document type definition, or an XML schema. Both are possible. Of course, XML schema is the latest technique to describe the grammar for XML documents. DTD is the older one. Okay, let us see both of them in the next few slides. We will understand what is DTD and then what is XML schema. That means you can also describe the grammar of the XML documents and structure of the XML document. DTD schema are the mechanisms to define the structure of the XML documents. This is not there in HTML. And if you look at the properties of the XML documents, an XML document is of nested document structure, that is nesting is possible. Each element contains a start tag and an end tag like what you see in HTML. So every element has a start tag, and then after the content it should be properly ended. Okay, this is known as the start tag of the element, this is the end tag of the element. Each element in a document can be either complex or atomic. And if one element contains another element, nested elements, then that element is known as a complex element. Otherwise, and an element just contain the end content or the text, then it is known as the simple atomic element. Each element may optionally be associated with a set of attributes, and along with the element name you can also specify certain attributes which are unique to those elements. A document is said to be well formed. There is a notion called well formed XML document. When we call an XML document to be well formed, it is said to be well formed if the names of the starting and end tags match. Okay, so the starting and end tag should match. Suppose if I say that the starting tag is person, and after the content if I say that if it is a dog, then it is not matching. The start and end tag does not match, hence I can say that it is not a well formed XML document. To be a well formed document, to be called as a well formed document, the starting and end tag must match. At the same time, tags are nested properly and the attribute should be unique. These are the features or properties of the XML documents. Let us have a look at a sample XML document. This first line is a very standard content of any XML document, which is going to talk about what is the version of XML, and very predominantly used version of XML is 1.0 version. Of course, 1.1, 1.2 up to 1.5 has come, and quite recently the work is on for XML 2.0 also. And the second attribute says that it is not an attribute. The second component of this first line says that whether it is a standalone, yes or no, boolean, meaning that if standalone is yes, it says that no DTD is associated with this document, that is no proper structuring is defined. Okay, so you can create your XML document with whatever choice you wish. Okay, and if the standalone is no, then it says that it is not a standalone document. Whatever elements you have in this document, they should follow the structure which has been very well defined in a specific DTD. That is the meaning. The second one is because I said that it is not a standalone document. It means that it should follow some structure. Where the structure or the grammar of the document is described in some DTD, then the second line should clearly mention what is the DTD file that has been adopted to create or structure this particular XML document. This is the body of the XML document. So this content of the XML document should follow the description which is specified in the DTD file, which is pub.dtd. Doc type publications, that is the root, the document XML document publications.xml is following or is adopting the structure which is defined in pub.dtd DTD file. Okay, then comes the body of the XML document. The root element, every XML document can be represented as a tree, that is the data contained in the XML document can be represented as a tree, and at the same time we can also specify the structure of the document. Not only the data, the structure of the document can be represented in a tree-like structure. The root element for this document is publications, and in this example it contains one book element which is sub-element of the root element publications, and the book element contains one title element and one or more author elements and one price element. If you look at the author element, it can contain two sub-elements. The first one is name of the author, second one is address of the author. Okay, so this is the structure. And if you look at this, how can I specify this how can I put this in a tree-like structure? Publications is the root element and it can contain book elements. Okay, if I say plus, it is one or more book elements, and book element contains one title element and one or more author elements and one price element. This is the summary of the XML document, summary of the structure of the XML documents. Okay, so the root element is publications. The next, it contains one or more book elements. Each book element contains one title element, sub element, one or more author elements, and then one price element. And moreover, each author element contains one name sub element and one address sub element. This can be viewed. This will give me the structure of the XML document. The same structure can be represented using a DTD document. Okay. And if you look at the XML document, we can also include the comments in the document by using this syntax. Okay. And if you wanted to specify the location of the document, if I look at this XML document, this gives the DTD file I am adopting to structure this XML document. It says that it is not along with the document, rather it is available in the system and as a separate file which is known as pub.dtd. If I don't specify the path, it indicates that in the same system, in the same directory where this XML document is sitting, the pub.dtd file is also available. Otherwise, if it is available in some other directory and in the same system, I can also specify the path of that particular directory where this pub.dtd file is existing. Otherwise, it is optional, and in some cases, the DTD file you are adopting can be available on some other machine, and in that case, I will be specifying here in this double quotes the URL of that particular machine where this pub.dtd file is existing. So that's why it indicates, the first line indicates that to specify the location of the DTD document, I can use this syntax or this syntax. If I use this syntax, it indicates that, and it is optionally the DTD code. Okay, the whatever code I write for the DTD, whatever the specifications I write for the DTD, they can be written in the same document of that XML file. Okay, that is also possible. But in this case, I am writing it as a separate file whose name is pub.dtd and it is available in the same system. If I don't specify the directory structure, it indicates that it is in the same directory where the XML document which is using this pub.dtd is residing. Okay, and in some other cases, it can be on some other machine. In that case, the URL should be given. http www.xyz.com and pub.dtd. It indicates that the pub.dtd adopted by the XML document is not available in the same location or same system, or or it says that it is available on some other machine on the net. So this is the URL which indicates the location of the pub.dtd file across the net, which is available on the net. Okay, and optionally we can also define or declare attributes for the elements. Suppose there is an element called as book and then it has an attribute called as ID. I can specify it like this, and in the same tag, in the opening tag itself, I will specify what is the attribute. I am not talking about the DTD, it is the XML, body of the XML document. If there is an element called as book, if it is associated with some attribute called as an ID, then in the opening tag itself, I can specify the value for that particular attribute. That means optionally, I can also, there is a facility, I can also include attributes for the elements in XML documents. Okay, what is DTD? DTD, document type definition, serves as a grammar. Okay, it can be recursive for the underlying XML document. To some extent, it can also serve as a schema for the data represented by the XML document. It describes what elements, what attributes are possible in an XML document and then what are permitted in the XML document. It is an option for an XML document to have a DTD or going without a DTD document. That means if you are using XML technology to store data or communicate or exchange data, it is your option whether to use a DTD or not. If I am using a DTD file, what does it mean? I am going to define the structure or grammar of the elements or structure of the XML document. That is, I am going to specify what elements can be possible and what attributes are possible in the XML document. It is an optional thing, and if you don't want to put a strict structure on the XML document, it is your choice, and you can build your XML document without any XML DTD. That's why if you look at the database models, you can categorize them as unstructured data models. If I store data in text files or some other unstructured files, it is known as unstructured data model. The next category is strictly structured data models. That is, before you start inserting data into the database, you need to define the structures where you will store the data. And for example, it is object databases, relational databases, and network databases. All these things, they fall under strictly structured data models. If you take the example of relational data model, that means the data is stored in terms of tables. So before I insert data into the database, I need to define the structure of these tables by using create table definitions, and then I can start inserting the data. And without constructing the tables, you cannot insert the data into the database. That means whenever you insert a tuple or a record into the table, it should strictly follow a particular format or the structure, and it should strictly follow the degree or ority of the relation, that is the number of attributes of that relation, and you should also follow the format or the data types for the various attribute values, and it is mandatory. That's why those kind of data models are understood as strictly structured data models. The best example for that is relational data model. The third category is semi-structured data model. That means if you wish, you can impose a structure, or if you wish, you can create your database without any structure. In other sense, XML documents, I see them as databases because I store data in those documents, and these documents can be queried or stored persistently, and then I can retrieve the data at a later point of time. Hence, I view these XML documents which contain data for the businesses or the applications as potential databases. Hence, what is the model I am going to use here? For an XML document, I treat it as an as a database, and if I wish, I can impose a grammar or the structure, or if I don't need, I can simply construct an XML document without specifying any structure. That means without associating any schema or the DTD. That's why XML documents or the XML data model is known as semi-structured data model. It is an option. Okay. If the user wants, he can impose structure, otherwise he can construct an XML document without imposing any structure. And when I am using this DTD, in other sense, I am going to impose structure on the XML documents. DTDs are recommended to ensure document conformity, especially in business to business transactions where XML documents are exchanged. Nowadays, most of the businesses, organizations, they exchange business data by using these XML technology or XML documents, and hence whatever the data that has been sent by one business or the organization, that need to be tested for its correctness. It should be validated. Hence, always it is better to associate XML documents under exchange between the businesses or organizations, and they need to be attached with the DTDs or the schemas, so that the person or the client system which is receiving the XML document can validate that XML document for the strict structure, and then only the parsing or understanding of the information contained in the XML documents becomes straightforward and easy. Hence, it is always recommended to attach XML DTDs along with the XML documents that are being exchanged by businesses. DTDs are helpful in validating a document, and DTD allows the document author to define the order and frequency of child elements. You can also specify the order. We can also specify the frequency, how frequently they can repeat in a given element. And it also facilitates attribute and then reference declarations. We will see that in the next few slides. And to define the structure of the XML document, the DTDs use EBNF, Extended Backus Naur Form. And if you are familiar with the grammar of programming languages, then you should be knowing what is Backus Naur Form. So that is the standard which is used to describe the grammar of programming languages, and then I am not going to spend much on this. So the similar kind of formulations are used to describe the DTD files, describe the structure of the XML documents. The major drawbacks of DTD are owing to all these advantages, and we also have few disadvantages with DTD. It is not rich in data type. That means I can use only limited data types, only character data, strings can be used. Whatever may be the type or domain of the element, I need to capture that as a character string. Nothing else is possible. And it is not flexible as it does not use the XML syntax. Here is a sample DTD file. Though it looks like XML document, if you carefully observe this syntax, it is not XML syntax. It is not XML syntax. Hence, whatever parsers we use to parse the XML documents for the details cannot be used to parse the DTD files. It is not possible. That is one drawback. And let us have a look at a sample DTD of the XML document, that is pub.dtd, which has been used in this document. Okay, so it is doc type publications, that is the XML document name. This is the element, root element is publications. In parenthesis I write the book star, meaning that the publications root element can contain 0 or any number of book sub-elements. Then the element book contains title sub-element, author plus. This expression indicates one or more author sub-elements and one price element. And if you look at the title is a leaf element, and then it is not a complex element, it is going to contain some string. The strings are indicated, they belong to the data type has PC data, parsed character data. You have two data types, PC data and C data. And there is a small difference between PC data and C data. Nevertheless, both are going to represent the string constants. Okay. And if it is a PC data, the parsers, when you apply parsers to parse the XML document, and this content is also identified or recognized by the parsers. If it is simply C data, it is character data which is not parsed, which is not a PC data, then the parsers will skip this content. Okay, that is the only difference. Otherwise, for all elements, the content can belong to only of type string. Okay, character strings, nothing else. And if you look at the author element, it is a complex element which contains name sub-element and address sub-element. And price is a leaf element which is not complex, which is of type PC data. In other sense, I can imply that all the leaf elements, they belong to PC data. That is, they are not complex. Hence, they should contain some valid text or content of the document. Then address is PC data again, and name is PC data. This is how I can specify the DTD documents. Here in the earlier DTD document, I have used some expressions, book star, author plus. Let us see what is the meaning of that. If I say an element person star, this expression indicates that it can be 0 or any number of person elements. Person plus one or more person elements. Person, this question mark symbol, 0 or 1 person elements. Person alternation animal. It indicates that if I say that company is an element which contains person or animal as sub-elements, it indicates that a company can either contain one person element or animal element. That is the meaning of this expression. Let us have a look at some sample. You observe this XML code snippet. The root element is node. Root element is node. It contains two node elements. Recursive node, again it contains node elements. The first node contains two node elements, node, and the second node contains only one leaf element. And this node element contains one leaf and this contains one leaf. Okay, so if you carefully observe, this is going to describe a binary tree. In a binary tree, each node maximum can contain two elements, and at the same time, an element can contain only one element also, or sometimes it can be zero elements also. It is possible. Okay, and it can be a leaf element. That is the meaning. So how do I define the DTD document for this? How do I structure this? Describe the structure of such kind of elements. Element node. It can contain a leaf or two nodes. And what is the meaning of a node? A leaf can be a PC data. So this is a simple code snippet which describes the structure of this binary tree which is given in this XML document. Okay? Yeah. And defining element attributes in a DTD. We can also, this is how we can define the attributes. At least we should use this syntax, at least. That means I am going to attach an attribute for what element? Person element. What is the name of the attribute? ID. What is the type of the attribute? Capital ID. And what is the other specification? Required. Meaning that what? For this ID attribute, the type is ID and the value should be supplied by the end user. And another attribute person, the person also has another attribute called as mother, and it is the type is IDREF. When it is of type IDREF, it refers to another predefined ID in the document, and required means it should be supplied by the user, that is the person who is constructing the XML document. And the person element also contains one more attribute called as father, whose type is IDREF, and then it is also required. And another attribute of person element is children. It is not one IDREF, it is a sequence of IDREFs, that is more than one ID is possible under this, and wherein each ID should refer to a valid ID in the document. It is implied, meaning that what? It can be there and it can be skipped. That is the meaning of. This is how we can specify the attributes, or I can attach attributes to the elements. And we have types called ID, IDREF, and then IDREFs. The next thing is XML schema, which is more sophisticated than DTD. But if you look at DTD and XML schema in a broader sense, both serve the same purpose. XML schema is the prime standard for specifying XML documents, and initially DTD was introduced, and then later, owing to the disadvantages of DTD and XML schema, which is more sophisticated way of representing the structure of the XML document, has been introduced. And it is now it has become the prime standard for specifying the XML documents. It is rich in supporting specifications of both types and integrity constraints. Like what we do in ER modeling in databases, you can also specify the types, and it supports a rich range of the data types. And you can also specify other integrity constraints like min-max constraints and all these things. And each XML schema consists of a schema element and a variety of sub-elements, most notably element and complex type, simple type, and which determine the appearance of elements and their content in the instance documents. Complex types allow elements in their content and may carry attributes. Simple types cannot contain elements and they cannot carry attributes. That is the difference between the simple type and the complex type. And one can create new types and can specify occurrence constraints. That is, how many occurrences of a given element is possible. If you look at the DTD, you can only specify that person star. You can only specify that 0 or more, and you cannot specify it more detailed in a more detailed way in this DTD. But if you are using XML schema, I can clearly specify exactly how many occurrences of a given element is possible that can be specified. XML schema supports built-in simple types, int, short, float, date, all these are supported. But wherein if you look at the DTDs, only the data type that is supported is the character string. And in XML schemas, based on these simple types, we can also derive more other simple types, okay, based on these built-in data types. XML schema is much more expressive than DTD. And one more very biggest advantage of XML schemas are the syntax of XML schema is like XML document. It follows the syntax of the XML documents. Hence, whatever parsers I use to parse XML documents, the same parsers can be used to parse and then understand the detailing of the XML schemas. Okay, but that facility is not there with the DTDs, because though XML DTDs look like XML following XML syntax, but actually they don't follow the XML syntax. That's why parsing DTDs using XML parsers is not possible, but parsing XML schemas using XML parsers is quite possible. That is the biggest advantage. Now let us have a look at this sample document. Department is the root element, department, and it contains employee elements, okay, one or more employee elements. Each employee element contains name, and it also contains age, and wherein it is a string, and employee also contains an ID called as EID, ID of type ID, which is EID, okay, and age is of type numeric value, and this is string, and this is ID, which is unique. Now if I take this XML document, if I wanted to specify the XML schema to describe the structure of the XML document, I can have an XML schema document like this. The first line, XS colon XML schema, XML NS, XML namespace, XS, it is the variable. I can use whatever name I wish. It is an identifier. That means if you look at this, I already told that XML schema document also follows the syntax of the XML documents. So this is one element, this is another element, this is another element, this is another element in the document, and so on and so forth. So when I am using these elements in this schema document, where is the detailing or structuring of these elements is available? It gives that it is available at this URL. XML schema document, which is available at www.w3.org. This describes the schema elements, schema, element, complex type, sequence, all these things. So now onwards, I will use XS as the qualifier to refer to the elements that have been adopted from this particular URL. Okay. Then the first element is, this is the element name. What is the name? Department, and it is a complex type. And what is the sequence of elements? Again, XS element. Employee is an element. Minimum occurrence is 1, maximum occurrence is unbounded. This is the biggest advantage of XML schema. You can clearly specify the frequency or occurrence of a given element. Is it a simple element? No. If you look at the employee element, it is a complex element. So complex element, it is a type, and what is the sequence of elements? Name, name, and then another name of the element is age. What is the type? String. It is int. The sequence ends, and there is one attribute called as EID. What is the type? It is a string type. That is, as a value for this EID, I pass on a string. So this is the end of the complex type element, and then this is the end of the sequence, this is the end of the complex type, and this is the end of the element, and this is the end of the XML schema. So if you carefully observe, it exactly follows the syntax of any XML document. Hence, it is amenable for parsing by an XML parser. That is the advantage. That means if you look at this, it is more powerful than XML DTDs. I can specify the min-max occurrence, I can specify the various types of the domains, okay, and then I can specify other things now, whether it is complex or not, attributes, all these things can be specified. But the element names I am going to use in this XML document have been taken from this, the namespace URL. So that is the only thing that need to be carefully observed in XML schemas. And if you go to the URL www.w3schools.com, okay, /XML, you can see the tutorials. Lot of tutorials are available there, and which will explain the DTD, and then which will explain about the XML schemas, and which also will explain about the query languages for XML documents. In this session, we discussed what is an XML document, what is XML technology, and what is the difference between HTML and XML, and what are the basic characteristics of XML documents, and how a DTD will help us in defining the structure of an XML document, and how we can use XML schemas, okay, to describe the structure of the document, which is more sophisticated than XML DTDs. Okay, let us stop here. Thank you very much.